Welcome back to the manor. Julian McBain here, and we are hunting Longtooth. And we're gonna get a little bit more philosophical today, I think. I've been thinking about some stuff, and I just want to kind of roll around these ideas with you that I've had rolling around in my head. Hopefully you find it interesting, but we'll find out. But before we get started, if you're new to the channel, welcome to the manor. Please take a moment and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 13 million subscribers, one subscription at a time, so make sure you subscribe. Also, please consider going to patreon.com/JulianMcBain if you want to support my work. If you do, you'll get exclusive content, and July's video should be coming pretty quickly. Got a couple busy weekends, but I'm going to try to knock that out, hopefully in the very near future, and have that up for you all. I did do a demo video in June, so it's not strictly an exclusive video. You go to patreon.com/JulianMcBain, and you will see the type of content I am trying to put out for my members. So, I was talking to someone last Sunday, and we were kind of discussing how the world has changed since the pandemic has come around. And one of the things that I noticed is that a lot of people have started doing things that they hadn't done in a very long time or never tried before. Things like, especially here in Vermont, like we had a major seed shortage, and it was hard to get a hold of livestock because no one was working, so everyone started becoming farmers. It's a very Vermont thing to do. You know, you have a home, you got a little bit of land, you can grow a garden, and it's something to do. It's very salt of the earth, right? It's really going back to basics, and I know that's very common where I live, where you know, when things are unstable, when you don't know what's going to happen next, you go back to basics. You go back to the things that let you feel like you are, for lack of a better term, it's what makes you feel spiritually human, right? It lets you dig into the earth. You can feel it between your fingers. It makes you feel real. Because for a year and a half, nothing really felt, for lack of a better term, things didn't feel real. There was no regular life. We were shut away from our friends. We weren't able to go to, a lot of us weren't able to go to work. I was actually very fortunate that I had an essential job. I was able to go to work. Even when we interacted, it was over digital medium. And so people looked for a way to ground themselves. And so a lot of people did so by grounding themselves literally by digging in the dirt and growing their own vegetables and trying to produce their own food. And I know that there were some successes, and there were probably a lot of failures, because for a lot of people, either they'd never done it before or they hadn't done it for a long time. And I'm not saying that to cast shade. You know, growing vegetables, having done it before, is not an easy thing. There's a lot of timing issues. You have to have the balance in the pH, make sure you're fertilizing properly. You can over-fertilize, you can under-fertilize. There's got to be enough water. If you could go through a dry spell where you're watering every day, and all of a sudden you got a downpour that just floods everything out. I mean, it is not easy. There's a reason we really need to respect the farmers. I've lived in farming country my whole life. I've never been a true farmer, but I've lived in farming country my whole life. I've got a damn good idea of what farmers go through. And for a lot of these new, again, I'm not casting shade, but amateur farmers, people who don't do it for a living, which isn't to say they aren't good at it, they just don't do it for a living. It must have been a steep learning curve, and that was good because it let them learn things the old-fashioned way. And a lot of people picked up new skills. A lot of people picked up things like sewing or weaving or just things that went by the wayside, actually things that go really well in some of my hobbies. But another thing that people seem to be looking for is something more spiritual. And so I think there are a lot of people who turn to philosophy, unfortunately, for better or for worse. I won't say unfortunately because I'm a politician. A lot of people turn to politics. But I think what we're going to see now is we're going to see an uptick in a lot of things. We're going to see an uptick in people who want to grow their own food. And I think that is fundamentally a good thing. We're going to see an uptick in people who look for something in the spiritual realm, whether it's just reading more often, or they go into spirituality, or they start going to church or something of that nature, I think that is going to be a fundamentally good thing. And I'm not saying that a person needs to go in any particular denomination or be affiliated with any particular religion or spiritual practice, but to have that. One of the things I said, I was actually talking with a priest, and I was discussing things with him, and I said, I think that one of the things that people have figured out is the piece they were missing was the spiritual. And again, I was being very non-specific as to the direction of that spirituality. But spirituality is the foundation upon which the building that is the structure of our lives is built. And as I said that, I had almost an epiphany. Because I think that is a fundamental truth. I think that is a philosophical truth. That the spiritual is the foundation upon which we build our lives. And without a strong foundation, you can't build anything. I mean, you can, but it's a very flimsy structure. You know, it's like even a shed has to rest on something other than just dirt, right? Most people will, theoretically you can put it on dirt, but it rots. You know, a lot of people put it on blocks. You can put it on cinder blocks and just raise it off the ground so that it doesn't, so the dirt doesn't mingle with the wood in the water, and the dirt doesn't rot the wood out, and you end up with dry rot. Similarly, you have to have that foundation upon which to build your life. And in that spiritual sense, it also inculcates your moral code. And again, everyone's going to have a slightly different one. Mine actually comes from the Middle Ages. I very much try to hold to the Noble Habitus. I wrote articles on it at mcbainmanor.com, but it's really basic. I want to get it right, so I'm just going to pull it up so I have it in front of me. Because it's 6 tenets. It's, loyalty, forbearance, hardihood, largesse, the Davidic ethic, and honor. And is it perfect? No, of course it's not perfect. None of us are perfect. No one's going to have the perfect ethical code. Okay? I don't think that a human being is capable of having a perfect moral code, because we're human. We're flawed. I would be very concerned if I met someone who thought they weren't flawed. In fact, I'd be very concerned that they were narcissistic. But the purpose of that is for us to have some sort of a baseline that people can understand. And largely speaking, I believe that most people have a very similar, I'm not saying same, I'm not saying, it's not going to be exact. We all have a very similar baseline that we kind of operate from. And that's what allows us to mingle with each other and interact with each other and not have utter chaos around us. And for years before the pandemic, we ignored that piece of us. We just assumed everything was going to work right. And then the chaos of the pandemic and immediately in the years prior to the pandemic, probably the 8 years prior to the pandemic, I would say things started to really get rocky. I'd say it was probably 2012. Which is ironic because, Mayan calendar and all that. Maybe that's what why the Mayans left the calendar. I never thought of that. Like the world started to get really chaotic around 2012. And that's when the Mayan calendar ended. And everyone joked that it would be the end of the world, right? And there were a lot of philosophers that I was reading and listening to, and I wish I could remember their names and reference their materials, but they're like, no, it's not going to be the end of the world. It's going to be the end of an era. And it's going to usher in a new era where there are going to be troubled times. And that doesn't mean that we aren't going to come through okay. We will find a way, I'm sure. But there is going to be a period of troubled times that we have to go through. There's going to be darkness. And we will make it through that by remembering who we are at our core and interacting with each other in a way that we do not make life worse, right? Because all of us want to build things to make life better. But sometimes we don't think about the things we do that we need to do in order that life not get worse than it is. And I was talking with a friend of mine. Him and I disagree on a lot, but in many ways he's almost a mentor. And we were discussing this, and so we were discussing something in the realm, and we were talking about oftentimes in life you are brought up to, you have choices, and you'll have like 5 or 6 choices, and one of the choices creates the most good, and one of the choices creates the least bad. And oftentimes they aren't the same choice, and that's not obvious to most people. They'll look at all the benefits, but not understand the underlying drawbacks to using that option. And because they're only focused on the good, they won't realize the cost of moving in that direction. And so because they don't realize the cost, they move in that direction, not out of malice, but out of ignorance, thinking they're going to do the most good. And what ends up happening is, it's like I'm gonna use a metaphor. A person wants to build the nicest home they can possibly build for their family, but they only have a budget of so much, right? So we'll call it 50. We'll call it 50 gold. Let's say they have 50 gold with which to build their house, and they want to make the house as beautiful and nice for their family as they can possibly build it. And so in order to do that, you have to have a strong foundation. But the more you spend on the foundation, the less you can spend on the things that are above the foundation. And so they think about it, and they look at the ground, and the ground's okay. And they're like, well, I can either spend money on the foundation and have a smaller house, and so maybe my kids don't get the room size that they really want. Or instead of having a full basement, I can just do a crawl space, and that's okay. And now I can have the bigger house because they don't have to pay the contractors to dig as deep, and it costs less gold. And they can have those bigger rooms. But as the years go by, without having that basement foundation for everything, working on the pipes is harder, and you can't put the water heater or the furnace down there, so they take up space in the main part of the house. And so when people have to work on things, or when something goes wrong, it's not in a concrete underground piece, it's on the wood floors of the first floor. So what you did is you created this thing that was really good, but you didn't mitigate the consequences of having certain things above ground that really you don't want to have above ground. And so you didn't take the thing that did the least bad, right? The things that could cause the most damage weren't put in a place where you could mitigate for that. And so the fact of the matter is that we often have to go through life and make decisions. You know, what is the most good? But then we also have to think about what creates the least bad. And unfortunately, one of the things we really have to do is we have to look at life, and you really need to have a bias toward what creates the least bad. Because you can always go back and adjust if you have to make the least bad choice and you find out you could possibly edge toward the more good without creating more bad. You can make those fine adjustments, but once you take the leap to the most good, the cost of that most good is going to happen regardless of whether you want it to or not. And it's far harder to mitigate the cost after you've taken the action than it is to adjust the action to where it is ramp it up to a place where you're still within the acceptable cost. And so I think that's something that a lot of people are discovering that they really are missing in their lives, is they've missed that philosophical foundation. And it's creating hard times. And it's creating hard times because we've had it so easy. You know, there's a saying, and I'm going to modernize it a little bit. It's strong people make good times. No. Hard times create strong people. Strong people create easy times. Easy times create weak people. Weak people create hard times. And I might have the order of that off, but this has been rolling around in my head a lot. And I might do a whole segment on this. But I think life has been so good to us, it's creating hard times because we've lost our purpose. And I think we're inventing purpose by creating hard times. And I think that's bad. I think it's real bad. And we can see it all over the world. And I don't know, I personally don't know the answer to it. You know, being a student of Petersonian philosophy, and I'm reading the where he got the basis of that philosophy, which I'm sure that if anyone called him a philosopher, he'd probably be like, huh? But, you know, one of the things that I've been looking at is I see all of the chaos around me, and I want to do something to fix it, but I realize that one of the things that are broken is myself. And I don't mean that in like a psychological way necessarily, or, you know, I'm not a broken person, but I'm not living my life in the best way I could possibly do so. And I'm working on it, and I've got to rebuild the things that I lost throughout the pandemic. I've said that before. We all have to rebuild the things that we've lost throughout the pandemic. And one of the things I realized I'd lost is I'd lost that foundation. And so I went looking for it. And I think I found it. And it occurred to me, and this is where that conversation came up, is that I found my foundation because I went looking for it. How many people are looking for their foundation? How many people don't realize that their foundations have been disrupted by the world events over particularly the last 18 months, and have not taken the time to seek that foundation and ground themselves and put themselves back at least on level ground? I think there's a lot to be said for that. And I'd be curious about those of you among my viewers who think about such things as well. Because to me, it has been quite the enlightening experience over the last couple of months. I have sought to understand myself better and become a better person for it. I have realized the mistakes I have made over the last 18 to 24 months. Even as I thought I was, and I did, I improved a lot, and I made up for past mistakes. But the funny thing about fixing past mistakes is you often make new mistakes. Now, that's a good thing. You don't learn if you just keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. And as you get better, you are still going to make mistakes. You are not perfect. I'm not perfect. Nobody is a perfect human being. But I mean, that means I have to go back, and I talked about this a little bit in my last video, and repair the mistakes that I made while making the journey along the way. And every time I make a mistake, I need to go back and fix it so that the structure of my life that I'm building upon this new foundation, and I think a lot of us are starting pretty much from foundation, will be the strongest possible structure I can build. So maybe instead of using framing timbers, I'm actually using bricks or stone to build the strongest structure I can. And so that's really what I'm aiming at. And I don't care if it takes 3 times as long for me to build the structure, if the structure has the strength of stone, right? Which makes sense, you know, as a Freemason. You would expect me to build the house of my life out of stone. Of course, this isn't a literal house, it's a metaphorical house. But building out of stone takes a long time. You've got to mix the mortar. You need to have the equipment with which to lift the blocks, and you have to smooth the blocks using the working tools. And and make sure that the blocks fit correctly. And then you pour in the mortar and you make sure they all get together. And this guy just landed on my fucking head. And so, you know, you get, and so it'll take me longer, but perhaps by the time I am done, I will have made the strongest possible house for myself and for my family. Because you are not the only person in this house of life that you build. Your family's in that house with you to a certain extent, and their houses are connected to yours by relationships. And so if I build this house, it needs to be able to sustain me and my son and any spouse that I may find in the future. Currently, I don't have a significant other. It's an unfortunate fact that, you know, we all go through. But I need to build the house so that it is one that any potential mate would want to be affiliated with and live in. And eventually that house will have to be able to support my parents because, you know, eventually they aren't going to be able to work anymore. The fact of the matter is that building a retirement today is not easy. Even if you do everything right, it's very easy for it to completely go, to get screwed up. Trying my best not to overdo the cussing. Don't always succeed, but I try. I'm getting better. And so that is, in my opinion, that's the goal to have. And that's the goal I've set for myself. And I don't know, you know, you might be further along than I am. You may listen to me and go, this guy's full of shit. See, there I just messed it up. That's okay. You might say that I'm full of shit, and that's okay. It's a journey, and we're all at different places on this journey. And this is, maybe I should do a reading of Miles the Knight and just kind of go through the philosophy of Miles the Knight, because Miles and the Knight, I should say, because I think there is a lot packed into that short story, and it really speaks about what I've been talking about the last 2 episodes. Oh, that would be a great Patrons exclusive, actually, to come to think of it. Maybe I'll do that. So yeah, that's the thoughts that I had for today. So tell me what you think. You know, make a comment. I love comments. And I try my best to respond to them. I'm not always successful. Sometimes I'm not informed there's a comment. Sometimes it goes to my spam filter unfairly, which YouTube is really good at doing. I've discovered a whole bunch of them. I'm like, why the hell are these in my spam filter? And I just like mass approve them. But when a pertinent comment comes up, I do respond. And I try to respond as for lack of a better term, I try to respond as intelligently as possible. I am not always successful. But yeah, please, by all means, leave a comment. If you think I'm full of it, tell me why. And let's talk about it. Let's engage in the discussion. I saw a quote earlier. It was like, I don't know all the answers, but I'm really interested to think about the question. So I'm going to back away from this long tooth so he doesn't decide to bite my face off. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 13 million subscribers, 1 subscription at a time, so make sure you subscribe. And as always, I really appreciate the support, and we will see you in the next one.